Good evening and welcome to All Saints. Wednesday evening, September 13th, and we're going to have a special presentation for those of you who are here in person and the folks tuning in from the from the Climate Reality Project. So let's begin. My name is Jerry Wagner. I'm a member of the All Saints Care for Our Common Home Ministry, or task force, if you want to call it that. As you can see from our mission statement up on the screen, we meet monthly and work closely with parish members and administrators to try to green our parish as well as our own lives as much as we can. Mary Jane Riley, my compadre, and I completed Climate Reality Project training in this past year. And we have with us Maura McNulty, Diane Stefani, and Annette Hogan, all from Climate Reality Project. They're going to be our presenters tonight. Mary Jane and I also completed the Laudato Si Animators program. What Pope Francis said was he called us to what was referred to as contemplation, to not only remember that this earth is our common home, like a sister with whom we share our life, but this presentation is part of the action that Mary Jane, Maura, Diane, Annette, and I, and hopefully all of you, will continue taking. The Climate Reality Project is a nonprofit organization. We have several chapters here in New York State, involved in education and advocacy related to climate change. It came into being in July 2011 as the consolidation of two environmental groups, the Alliance for Climate Protection and the Climate Project, both of which were founded by Vice President Al Gore. Maura McNulty is, as she puts it, the mother of two amazing and wonderful daughters. She was a teacher for almost 35 years, and as much as she loved teaching, she didn't retire, but she left it in 2022 so that she could focus full-time on climate emergency, the climate emergency. She completed the Climate Reality Project training in 2020. She says it was a transformative experience for her. It provided a solid science-based background on climate, and through the Climate Reality Project, she's had the chance to work with some of the most capable, warm, and even funny people that she's ever met. She's been worrying about the climate ever since she was 8 years old, and what she's learned over the past years is that the best antidote to climate anxiety is climate action. Maura is also no stranger to the All Saints neighborhood. She lived in the Westcott Nation back in the mid-1980s, and she's grateful to be meeting up with fellow travelers in her old stomping ground. Diane Stefani is a retired human resources leader who throughout her career led teams and individuals through large-scale change. This proved to be her most rewarding challenge, guiding 25,000 people through organizational culture change. She's active in the community and volunteers, draws strength and optimism from her fellow volunteers. She's also trained in Climate Reality Project as a leader, and she is co-chair of the Finger Lakes Greater Region chapter. She also serves on the executive committee of TIER Energy Network, a regional network of industry, community, and higher education representatives supporting the development of energy strategy for New York State. There she's able to tap into her professional background by focusing on workforce development strategy and implementation for clean energy jobs. She's also a Cornell Cooperative Extension Energy Navigator and a former chair and ongoing member of the Broome County Environmental Management Council. She and her husband love roaming the public lands of upstate New York. They adore their two adult children, their families, friends, and all the associated dogs, cats, and other creatures. Annette Hogan is a strong proponent of organic culture and gardening. Annette served on the board of directors of the Northeast Organic Farming Association of New York. Learning more about global warming in a course sponsored by the Pachamama Alliance in 2021 spurred her to increase environmental advocacy efforts. She enrolled for training with Climate Reality Project in 2023. She has written several local magazine and newspaper articles about agriculture and food. She studied journalism at Le Moyne College, and she lives in Liverpool. So we're in excellent company here today, and I think we're going to learn some things, and I welcome them and all of you, and I'm going to turn it over to Mary Jane.
I always have to bring the mic way down. Just a couple of housekeeping things before I forget. When you came in, the bathrooms would be to the left if you came in the front door, and of course they're non-gender specific, family, whatever you need. The other thing is, of course, the fire exits would be this door and in the back, okay? Now, what I wanted to do was to open with a prayer. In my desire for reconciliation with creation, I ask God for forgiveness and the grace of ecological conversion. I acknowledge the ways in which I personally have chosen convenience, selfishness, and greed over ecological and social justice. I also acknowledge the way structures, patterns, and cultures of sin impact my life, the lives of people on the margins, and the earth. Through my recognition of where I have fallen short in caring for creation and my brothers and sisters, and through God's mercy, I pray for a conversion of heart to amend my ways. I seek through prayer and actions to reconcile myself with God, creation, and humanity. And now we'll hear from Maura and Diane.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? All right, great. Let's see, can we advance to the first slide?
We did put this number up there. Do you want to explain that?
Oh, great. So, yes, so perfect. So for people who have questions or comments they'd like to make, you can text those to this number, and we'll ask them for the group. Great. All right, so good evening. As you know, we're here from the Climate Reality Project. We have a New York State coalition, and when the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, we recognized an opportunity to get everybody on board with moving into the future and away from fossil fuels and towards electrification in every aspect of their lives. But then we realized, wow, this is actually a really complicated topic. So we as a coalition worked for several months to comb through everything and to put together a slide deck and a set of resources that people can use. This is actually Diane's and my first time that we've presented this, so I'm counting on you to be a little forgiving in case we have glitches. But we'll aim for talking till about 7:45, and then after that I know people will have questions and comments, and some of you have already started your electrification journey, and I'm sure you'll have information for us to share too, so that's where we are. So we call this presentation Savings, Health, and Comfort. Here's one thing we'd like to emphasize is that this is not about sacrifice. It's not about giving things up. It's about having an affordable home that keeps you warm in the winter and cool in the summer. So, let's stop burning fossil fuels inside our houses. That's really our goal. The other thing, and so we're going to show you how to stack federal, state, and utility benefits over the next 10 years. Now, as I've said, there's a ton of information. We do have some handouts for you, and then I think Annette also gave you this handy-dandy little business card with a QR code on the back and also a URL. This is a fantastic one-stop shop. When you go to look at this website, you'll see there's a bunch of links organized in such a way that it'll really facilitate your process of moving towards electrification. So, and besides that, we will also provide you with a link to a PDF which is quite a bit more substantial than what we're showing you tonight, with lots and lots of links in it. So it really is like an annotated, comprehensive research tool for you to use. So don't worry about taking notes or feeling like you're losing track of some of the details. We'll all lose track of the details because there's lots of them. This is just the big picture, okay? So let's see, next slide. So this slide is from the Department of Environmental Conservation of New York State. It compiles data from 1990 to 2020. It was published in 2022. And we're showing you this just so that you have a sense of where greenhouse gas emissions are happening in New York State. As you can see, the lion's share is buildings with 32%. With transportation right behind it, which is why we're really focusing on getting off fossil fuels for buildings and transportation for today. This actually probably somewhat understates the impact of greenhouse gases being emitted by our buildings. More recent research is showing that it's actually closer to 38% rather than 32%, which really just underscores the need for us to get moving on this. If U.S. homes were a country, it would be the 6th largest emitter in the world. U.S. homes create more greenhouse gases per capita than all of Germany combined. So that's one of the reasons we're focusing on that. Now I think we're ready for the next slide. All right, we'd like to draw your attention to 3 big ideas here with this slide. And the first one involves a recognition that the world is changing really fast. I don't need to tell you that because I know you're reading the news too. And as the impacts of climate change intensify and accelerate, one thing that's happening is that countries all around the world and entities like the European Union are competing intensively to build the energy systems and the infrastructure we'll need to survive and thrive into the 21st century. And that's where the 3 uncles come in. I can introduce you to Uncle Bill, Uncle Ira, and Uncle Chip. These 3 bills are designed to work together to transform the U.S. economy. The CHIPS Act brings together research and production back to the U.S. so that we can start producing more of our semiconductors here, and also onshoring more of the supply chain for those semiconductors, because we can't have advanced power systems without good semiconductors and a reliable supply chain. And in the process, we'll hopefully make those cleaner and more humane as well. The Bilateral Infrastructure Act rebuilds the bridges and roads and culverts and all those things that I think we all recognize have gotten pretty shabby. But the Uncle Bill also invests in more climate-friendly, high-speed public transport, a nationwide network of charging stations, and broadband for underserved communities. So you guys may have heard, I'm sure you have heard, in fact, that people raise concerns about the size and reliability of the electrical grid as we shift on to renewables. And just that concern makes sense because most of our grid was last updated a little more than a generation ago, and it isn't as large and it's not as reliable as it could be. And it's continuing to age out. So we can continue to patch up the old system, or we can invest in a 21st century electrical grid. And that's why the bipartisan infrastructure bill invests $13 billion to expand the electrical grid to make it more responsive and less susceptible to extreme weather events. The goal is to build a storage and transmission system that can move renewable energy when we need it, where we need it, in the amounts that we need it. Finally, we have Uncle Ira, who is mainly who we're focusing on today. And Ira's goal is to incentivize everyone, individuals, landlords, houses of worship, small businesses, nonprofits, major corporations, everyone, to electrify everything and to power that electricity with renewable resources. So it really is a $370 billion carrot. There are no sticks involved. It's all incentives, and it's taken off like gangbusters. Every single part of the renewable energy sector is booming right now. So combined, this is really the big idea here, these three laws, which are going to transform our energy economy. It's going to create good jobs, it's going to clean up the air we breathe, and it's going to help mitigate some of the climate change and damage that we're experiencing. And in a bit of good news for our kids and grandkids, other countries are racing to make the same kinds of upgrades. So we're here to talk tonight about the Inflation Reduction Act, and here's the second big idea on this slide. The IRA is going to help you pay for your heating, cooling, water heating, power storage, transportation, and you can stack those benefits with New York State benefits, and then you can stack those benefits with your utility benefits, and that's what our goal is, to help you do that today. And then the last big idea of this slide is that I'm guessing that you guys can all remember a time, because I can remember a time, when I think people in this country were much more optimistic about what the United States could do as a country. I mean, I kind of grew up in a sort of a can-do, American can handle it kind of a world, and I think to some degree I feel as if we've lost a little bit of that, and that we as a country are a little bit fearful of the future. And so I just want to really express for myself, and I think on behalf of people in the Climate Reality Project, that we really have confidence that this nation can move forward and create a sustainable and solid future. So that's it. Those are my three jobs for that. And so we're ready for our next slide. All right, so the IRA is obviously a federal bill, but there's lots of New York State impacts. It's going to lower energy costs for all of us. It's going to provide for rebates, tax credits, direct pay, government grants. It's good for small businesses, because small businesses can also access, the tax credits that we're talking about tonight as well. For transportation, there's going to be there are currently tax incentives for EV cars. There's going to be point of sale rebates starting next year. You can get 10% off your Easy Pass if you drive an EV or an EV hybrid. So, and then we're really looking at a lot of job creation. This has taken off, as I said, a lot faster than people expected it to, so job creation is also taking off. So far, as of March of 2023, 100,000 jobs were created, and that's only, the curve has only gone up since then. We're looking for cleaner air, too, because instead of burning fossil fuels, we're shifting over to renewables, so there's less pollution, less nitrous oxide, methane, and other pollutants. And then communities also there's money in there for communities, for projects to deal with tree planting, to cope with urban heat issues, flooding, all kinds of things to help communities be more resilient. And then there's a lot of money in there also for rural projects, rural cooperative electrical organizations and things like that. So there's a lot coming down the pike for the IRA for New York State. And then I think, if you guys can take a look at this slide, if you can read this, I hate it when people read slides, so I don't want to read it to you, but.
Excuse me one moment, we just got a text that it's a little hard to hear on live stream, so maybe if you speak.
Oh, a little more directly?
Yeah.
Okay, how's that, better? Okay, check. So, I don't know if people have, does this feel like a pretty comprehensive list to you guys of reasons for learning about this? I don't know if people have other ideas that they want to throw in. All right, and then let's see, I think I'm going to turn it over to Diane.
Yeah, I think, so the suggestion is that we add something around caring for our common home, which I think is a great idea. As a spiritual calling. I think that's a great idea. So, and that's a great segue too, because Maura has just done a great job, I think, of giving us kind of the big macro picture of what's happening, not only from a climate change standpoint, but also from a government standpoint. And now it's time for us to kind of zoom in on what is it that we as individuals can do. And so what we've got here is a chart that shows some inefficiencies, some things that we all probably do to one extent or another where we waste energy. And we have an opportunity to make a change now and to do that in a way that's incentivized by government money. So I want to refer back to something that Maura showed. She showed a chart that gave the greenhouse gas emissions by percent in New York State. And if you remember, buildings were 32%, and transportation was 28%. So fully 60% of those greenhouse gas emissions come from two sources that I'm pretty sure we all use, right? We operate in buildings, we live in buildings, and we drive cars or trucks, right? So we have an opportunity to change the way that we power those elements and to really have a lower impact on greenhouse gas emissions. So the 11 inefficiencies, if you will, fall into 3 categories. And this is really a methodology for how you electrify your life, your buildings and your home, or your buildings and your transportation. And that is that, first of all, with your home, you weatherize your home. You're probably familiar with how you weatherize your home. You do things like shore up windows and make sure you have enough insulation, make sure you don't have any leaky ducts, those kind of things. So weatherization is the first step. The second step is then to electrify. And in this case, we're going to electrify a number of different things as we go through the process, things that are currently powered by fossil fuels. And then last but not least, we power it all. And we do that with solar or wind. In most cases, it will probably be solar. So next chart, please. All right, so I mentioned that weatherization is the first step to electrifying your home. And here in New York State, we're lucky enough to have a couple programs, one for low-income and middle-income individuals, the other for what we call market rate customers, which are people who don't fall into the first 2 categories. And those 2 programs allow us to have a free energy audit. So literally, you can go to the New York State Energy Resource and Development Authority, or NYSERDA's website, and you can find out about the programs that exist that allow you to use certain contractors that have been certified to do an energy audit. Energy audits are a great way to start your process because it's a level set. You get to really know your home in a way that you may not have, especially if you've been living in the home for a while, right? So the auditor comes in, will look for what's your energy use. They'll look at, do you have any unknown issues, maybe places where you're leaking heat or cool from your home. They'll look for health and safety issues, like do you have perhaps moisture in an area where you've got cold surfaces. That's a good place for mold to grow. They'll also deliver you opportunities where you can save money, and they'll deliver you a customized report, which really becomes your roadmap for how you weatherize your house. So with that, we can go to the next chart. Okay. So in your home, there are a number of things that may be operating through fossil fuels. So perhaps you have a gas stove. Perhaps you heat your house with fossil fuel. Perhaps you heat your hot water with fossil fuels. Those are all areas where you can solve that problem of using fossil fuels by using heat pumps. Are you familiar with heat pumps? Have you heard of them? A little bit, maybe? Okay, so just real quickly, so heat pumps are a new technology for us, and normally when we go buy a new appliance, I don't think most of us ask, how does that work? We ask questions like, does it work well? Is it going to save me money? But we don't necessarily want the science behind how it works. Just on a real macro level, though, I think it's important to understand that heat pumps are different than the way that we currently do a lot of heating in our homes. Currently, we use combustion and we burn things in our home. And that heat is then pushed through the house, either in the form of hot air or hot water, right? You've probably heard forced hot water, forced hot air. That's not what happens with a heat pump, though. With a heat pump, it literally moves heat around. So what the heat pump does is if it's ground source, it pulls heat from the ground. If it's air source, it pulls heat from the external air. It takes that heat and it infuses it into a refrigerant that's in the system. Refrigerants are the same things that are in your refrigerator or in your air conditioner. So they're not new to us. We already do this process, but kind of in reverse. So it infuses the heat into the refrigerant, and then it delivers heat into your home. So it's a very different kind of process. The other thing, and this is a real sale element for me with heat pumps, is that air source heat pumps not only heat your home, but they air condition it. So if you have an air conditioner, you can replace both your furnace and your air conditioner with a heat pump. Geothermal is a little bit more expensive, but you get more for your money. With geothermal, it can heat your home, it can cool your home, and it can heat your hot water. So it's 3 appliances in one. So there's some real benefits to heat pumps. I do want to, so that's kind of the science behind how they work. I hope that helps. There are plenty of places, if you want to get really, really deep in how heat pumps work, there are plenty of places out there, credible places, that can help you understand, as well as a good contractor can help you understand. I do just want to point out a couple facts on this chart, because there's a lot of concern about whether heat pumps work in the Northeast. Do they work in New York State when it's January? And so just a couple things that we found. So heat pumps outsold gas furnaces in the US last year. That's good news. As well, 1 in 6 heat pumps in Maine, 1 in 6 houses in Maine use heat pumps. If you've been to Maine, you understand what that means. It's a cold place. And then finally, another cold place, heat pumps are the main source of heat for homes in Norway. Next chart. Can you hear me okay? Let me know if you can't hear me on the live stream, please. Sounds great? Good. Okay. I've never been accused of being too quiet. All right, so there's a couple other appliances that you might want to replace as you move through the electrification process. One of them is heat pump clothes dryers. So if you currently use gas to dry your clothes, you can convert to either an a high-efficiency electric dryer, or you can convert to a heat pump dryer. It's really up to you. Both will solve the problem of using fossil fuels to dry your clothes. I do just want to put in a good word for drying your clothes. Anybody dry your clothes on a hanger or on a line? I started doing this last summer, and I'll tell you, there's almost something nostalgic about it. Every time I hang clothes on a line, I think of my mother, and yeah. So, but it's a very gentle way to dry your clothes. In the summertime, they dry within 30 minutes. In the wintertime, you can hang them inside, and there's lots of different apparatuses for doing it, and that costs no money. It's just a little bit of time. I will say that if I still had 2 young children, I'm not so sure I would be doing it, but today it fits my lifestyle. Okay, the second appliance that you can replace is if you have a gas stove, you can replace that with an electric stove. There are also these things called induction cooktops. I don't know if you've heard of those yet. They're kind of cool. They use kind of a magnetic energy, if you will. What I like about them is when you put the pot on, it comes on. When you take the pot off, it comes off. So there's no heating up, no cooling down, something I would have really loved when I had little hands in the house. You can't get burned on it. So. But again, that's kind of your choice, whether you'd rather convert to an electric stove or to an induction cooktop. All right, next chart. Okay, I did want to just make a nod to renters. I don't know if we have any renters in the audience, but I'm sure we know renters. And so if you're talking about this, we want them to know that there are things available under the IRA and in the electrification process that are there for them. So first of all, there is just the opportunity to talk to your landlord and encourage them that there are IRA benefits out there that are available to them to convert their fossil fuel equipment to electric. But then there are also some portable equipment options that are out there. For example, those induction cooktops that I just talked about, you can get a small unit for under $100. There's also inverter window ACs that are 1/3 to 1/2 more efficient than regular units. And then finally, if the person who's renting is paying for their own heat and they're not on a combined system with the rest of the building, you can get a heat pump that's a window unit and actually heat your house or heat your apartment and cool your apartment with that heat pump. Yeah.
Quick question. On the last slide, I think the rebate was $840. Is that just federal or is that combined?
So I'll talk more about this, but yes, there's an $840 credit, and that's actually a rebate. And that rebate is not yet available, but it will be in 2024. It's targeted at low-income households, but yeah, it's $840.
Resources combined or just the feds?
That's just the IRA, just the IRA. Okay, and I'm going to turn it back over to Maura.
All right. Stop me if it turns out we're having trouble hearing online. Let's see, let's try the next slide. All right, so solar. So there's two kinds of solar. One is residential and the other is community solar. Let's focus on residential first. So there are federal, state, and utility credits for all of these. One takeaway that we have, and you'll see links on the materials we provide you to Rewiring America and also on the business card that will take you to a calculator that will let you calculate how much you can get back on residential solar. And there's also information there on NYSERDA through New York State benefits for residential solar. So one takeaway message I really like you to have with residential solar is that go through NYSERDA, because if you want to connect with these benefits, you don't want it's. NYSERDA will walk you through that process. ESCOs, some of you guys may use ESCOs, and some of you guys may use a CCA. Those are community choice aggregation. Those are different animals from this. There may be savings there, there may not, but if you want the solar residential benefits, NYSERDA will show you how to find a contractor and those kinds of things. You will also save 5 to 10% on supply, although not delivery, by using residential solar. And then one thing you should know is if you go to Energy Sage, that you can enter your information. It'll spit out a lot of potential contractors for you. And what else did I want to say about this? Oh, and then the other thing is, and again, you can see this through the NYSERDA New York Sun, if you need additional financing aside from the tax incentives that you'll get, NYSERDA does have some loan programs. Some of them are income limited and some of them aren't. But potentially you can get a loan through NYSERDA that just, you make your payment just as part of your regular bill that you get each month. So NYSERDA is really trying to make it as easy as possible for you to install rooftop solar. Can I just ask here, how many people here already have rooftop solar? All right, great. All right, let's try the next slide. Here we have information about community solar. Here's the thing about community solar. If you have rooftop solar in New York State, you can't also have community solar. But if rooftop solar is, sort of in the distance for you, you're not planning on doing it right away, if you get community solar, you're getting some of the financial benefits without having to go through the process of installing it on your roof. And I would just say here, I think the most I'll say about that, given the time, is you'll get links to these slides so that you can check get the details. Sort of when you have a chance to sort of sit down and really read through it. All right, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so contractors. Again, cannot emphasize enough, get a NYSERDA certified contractor, and be aware that not every contractor is necessarily up to speed on air source heat pumps. So, for example, I'm in the process of converting now, and one thing that I have learned is that if you're talking to a contractor who is in the business primarily of installing fossil fuel furnace and AC, then in all likelihood what they're going to want to do is say, well, stick with a hybrid system or let us just replace your fossil fuel system. For example, I've had a couple of contractors come to my house to look at it and my house, and they'll say, well, air source heat pumps don't really work below 40 degrees. And that's just not true. But if they're in the business of selling hybrid systems, then that's what they're in the business of selling. So as Diane noted earlier, cold source heat pumps do work in cold weather. I've got friends in Maine who've used them for several years and have never had a problem. So, you have to be really sort of cognizant that the contractor you're working with is in the business of air source heat pumps, or in the case of geothermal, in the business of geothermal. Because the other contractors I had, because I do think it's worth getting a few different estimates, they walked in and they said, okay, well, we're going to give you all the details you need to install air source heat pumps, and there wasn't any sort of propaganda about how air source heat pumps don't work below 40 degrees. And then if you Google online questions to ask your contractor, you'll get some good advice about that. But be sure to talk to them about the weatherization that you've already had in your house. Be sure to talk to them about what the heat load is, what the service contract is, and costs and warranties. And then the other thing is that you will probably need to talk to them about whether or not you need an electrical panel upgrade, because now you're shifting to an electrical system. But again, all of that, there's incentives in the IRA, and NYSERDA has lots of incentives to help pay for those electricity upgrades as well. And all right, I think we're ready for the next slide. Is this me or you? It's me? Okay. Okay, let's see. So, first of all, just to state the obvious, obviously, we're better off if you can walk, if you can bike, if you can use public transport or e-bikes, by all means, please do. But if you do need to drive an EV or a hybrid, they really are great. They're lower in emissions. They have far fewer parts. I think it's around 20 parts in an EV engine versus 200 parts in an internal combustion engine. So they're just plain simpler. So they're a little bit more reliable. And then by the time you stack the incentives, the price will continue to come down. You've probably heard, how many people here have an EV or a hybrid already? Okay, so you guys, know a lot of this already. Starting next year, there will be point of sale rebates and they'll be quite substantial for EV cars. So that's another thing to look at. There is a limit. The list of EV cars is somewhat limited because, again, part of the goal is to onshore some of our own battery production and so on. So the cars have to have, be primarily built in the U.S. in order to be eligible for these incentives. I live in a pretty walkable neighborhood, so I don't do a ton of driving, but I have an EV hybrid, and I bought it in June of 2021, and I've only filled the tank 4 times. And the rest of the time I've done entirely just by plugging it into an outlet outside my house, and National Grid tells me that I pay $7 a month for my fuel. That's my entire car cost for the month, each month. And then I have solar panels on my roof, so actually my solar panels pay for my car, so it works out kind of nicely. Let's see, and then I think, no, it really is Diane. Is it Diane next? Excellent, there we go. All right.
So hold on to your heads now, because we're going to talk incentives. So I first of all want to just again point out this card and this QR code, because it takes you to, as Maura said, all the resources that we've compiled. And I will tell you that usually when I go to a site like this, I like kind of clutch because there's so much and it looks so hard. But truly, the team of people who put this together, and I wasn't part of it, but it was some of our climate reality colleagues, and it just kind of makes me go, oh, okay, this looks simple. This looks like I can do it. So I encourage you to go there. And you'll need to if you're going to follow this process, because all I'm going to do right now is kind of give you the highlights of what the incentives are. So you've seen this chart before. These are the 11 ways that we can be more efficient. And you've got this in the documents that Annette handed you when you walked in. And so everything I'm going to show up here during this section, you also have in your hands. So let's go to the next document. And forgive me, I don't like to read charts, but I'm going to read this one because this one is really important. So I'm going to make sure I talk really well into the microphone too. So these are some notes about the IRA tax credits and rebates. There are two different kinds of incentives within the IRA. Tax credits, those are things that you do this year and then you declare them on your taxes the next year. And if you have a federal tax burden, meaning you've either paid taxes into the system throughout the year or you didn't do that and you're paying it at the end of the year, if you have a federal tax burden, then you can declare the credit. If you do not have a federal tax burden, you can't. So one of the things you're going to see on this chart, and I'm going to say it a couple times, is talk to your tax accountant before you do anything with these things, because you want to make sure that you know what the financial implications truly are. Okay, so federal tax credits are in effect from this year through 2032. So you can take advantage of the tax credits now right up through 2032 and file for that last year in 2033 during that tax season. There are annual limits on the credits for many categories, but the credits reset every year. This is one of the fantastic pieces of this legislation is, you know how sometimes in the old days before the Affordable Care Act, they used to put a cap, lifetime cap, a lifetime maximum. There is no lifetime maximum on this one. You literally can keep using these credits from year to year. The caps are only annual. And there are no limits on the total federal income tax credits given, so there's not that cap. And here's where I'm going to say again, consult a tax attorney. So that's the tax credits. Now, some of the tax credits are going to turn into rebates next year. For example, this is a big one, the car. So the car, what is now a tax credit, and you have to have a tax burden to get, will be a point-of-sale rebate. So it's going to turn into that. Now, the federal rebates in general are administered by the state based on federal rules and will be available late 2023. I think actually it's going to be sometime in 2024. They have to do it within 2 years of when this IRA legislation passed, which was in the latter part of last year. So they have to get it done by then. Ensure that rebates are included in your invoice before you commit to a project. So if you are taking advantage of a rebate, make sure that that's in the invoice. And funds for the rebates are limited and could be used up quickly if not replenished. This makes it different from the credits, which are basically limitless. So as many of us as file for them, that's how much money the federal government is going to pay out. So the takeaway on this is federal credits are available now. Rebates are not yet available. And so we'll talk about those a little bit, but we don't have all the details yet. And then again, last but not least, I'll just again remind you with any of this, if it's got tax implications, please talk to somebody who knows something. I have 2 accounting courses that I took 40 years ago. I'm not the person to listen to. I don't know if more, did you take any accounting? No. So you'll want to talk to a professional. Okay, next chart. All right. So I know this is an eye chart, and I apologize, but at the end of the day, I think this is a really good summary of everything that's out there. If you remember, Maura mentioned you can stack these credits. So you can combine the federal credits with state credits and with utility programs. So you literally, in some cases, can get 3 different pockets of money from 3 different places. So I'm going to put on my glasses for this one. Maybe I won't be the only one. But, okay, so I want to just walk you through this chart. I want to walk you through this chart from left to right. So over on the left, you've got obviously the title of the slide, but then you've got some notes. I'm not going to read these to you other than to say that this first note is inaccurate, and I will tell you the way it should truly read when we get there. Then, starting in the federal and New York state incentives, first three columns that are in yellow, these are just the categories. So they're just the titles letting you know what we're talking about. So you'll see weatherization, you'll see electrical wiring, you'll see all those 11 elements that we said are ways that we are wasteful and that we can get credits for. In the middle, you'll see with a title that says U.S. and it's in blue, those three columns are the IRA credits, the federal incentives, either rebates or credits. And we're going to talk most about those. Then the last three columns are New York programs, and they're either the state programs or the utility programs. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth on those because they're pretty specific, and so they either apply to you or they don't, and they're not going to apply to everybody. And so there's a lot of literature online. In this QR code, there's a whole New York section where you can go in and really understand what those programs are. I will point out a couple of them where I think they're really meaningful. So if we go back to the center three columns under U.S., the parts that are grayed out are those rebates that, as I said, you can't use them yet. They're largely focused at low-income and middle-income individuals and families. And I will just tell you quickly, if you're not aware, the way that low-income and middle-income is determined is if you see up in the second row that's blue, you'll see this upfront rebate less than 80%, upfront rebate 80 to 150%. What that means is they have a median income for all areas in New York State. In Syracuse, it's $93,300. That's the median income here. If you are at less than 80% of that median income, you qualify for the low-income rebates. If you are between 80% and 150% of that number, you are middle income. And again, that's a good thing to check with your accountant on if you think you might fall into one of those categories, because they know what is truly considered income, et cetera. So you'll want to speak with them. So I'm not going to talk a lot about these rebates other than to say that the way that they are structured is, if you look at the one across from weatherization, for the low income, it says 100% up to $1,600. That means that if you fall into that area for weatherization, you can get up to $1,600 in a year to weatherize your house, replace doors, replace windows, put in more insulation, et cetera. In the medium income, it says 50% up to $1,600. That means $800. Okay, so you can get half that amount. That's different than the credits. And so I'm going to go over and start talking about the credits now in white. If you keep reading across, this says for weatherization for market rate customers. Those are people who aren't lower income or middle income. If you fall into that bucket, you'll get 30% up to $1,200 per year. That's a cap. So you get you get 30% up to an actual payout of $1,200. Does that make sense? Okay, I just want to make sure everybody understands that. Okay, so that's weatherization. Let's keep reading down on the tax credits, because those are what are available right now. So if you keep reading down, you'll see that the next 1, 2, 3, 4 of these categories are electrification. This is where you're really electrifying things. So you're looking at your electrical panel. We charge a lot of things that we didn't charge in the past these days. You may not have had it looked at in a long time, and now you're going to electrify things, so you really need to take a look at your electrical panel, as Maura talked about. There's air source heat pumps, geothermal heat pumps, and heat pump hot water heaters, all of which give you 30% up to a certain cap per year. Now, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that you can these credits reset every year. So you could potentially start a project one year, get the full amount, and finish it the following year and get the full amount. Okay? So they are workable that way. And then they're also stackable. So if you see the geothermal heat pump, the federal government's giving you 30% uncapped That's 30% of whatever the project costs you. If you go all the way over to the right, New York State is giving 25% up to $5,000. That's a stackable credit. You can use both of those. So that's a big, that actually could bring geothermal into kind of competition with air source heat pumps if you figure that geothermal does those three things: heat, cool, and heat hot water. So, okay, so that's how those work. So down at the bottom are the car credits. Now, the car credits are a little bit more complicated than what I actually experienced, I'll be honest with you. But car credits are $7,500 for federal for a new car. And then New York State gives another $2,000 under the Clean Air Act. So that's $9,500 for a new car. For used cars, they give 30% up to $4,000. That car has to be at least 2 years old and under $25,000 for a used car. There are income limits with both the used car and the new car. That the new car is $300,000 for a family and $150,000 for an individual, $1,000. So there are income credits. And then there's some other things about, where the minerals were mined and those kind of things that I'm assuming that hopefully dealers are going to know the answer to. So there is a list on NYSERDA's website of the cars that are eligible for these credits, so it makes it kind of easy. All right. Any questions on that? I think we're getting close to time, right? I got to get off the stage. Any questions on that? So many. Okay, we'll stick around. We'll stick around. Okay. Understood. Okay, I do just want to point out what else you've got in your hands real quickly here. So the next chart is a process that you can follow. This is a 10-year opportunity, right? Where I used to work, we used to say, plan the work, then work the plan. And you're going to want to do that here. You're going to want to plan the work. You have a furnace. It may be a perfectly good furnace, and you don't want to get rid of it before end of life, right? And maybe it's got 5 more years. So maybe in the 4 years from now, you start to think about replacing it. What you don't want to do is end up in the middle of January with the furnace going out, it's not revivable, and now you have to take whatever's on the truck, because if you don't, your pipes are going to freeze, right? So you want to really think about when is the end of life of projects, and when am I going to want to complete them. So this is a process you can use, and then the next chart is actually a planning document that our team has put together. If you go to the next chart. I know, again, a little small print here, but it has all the 11 ways that we can electrify and do things better. And down the side, there's a list of questions for you to answer. We've put in the average lifespan of different appliances so that you can see what those are. I'm certain that you can go to more information that's directly related to your specific appliance, but this will at least give you a starting point. All right. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Maura.
All right, I know it's getting a little late here, so we are going to make this quick. So again, I don't want to read this slide too, because I know that's a drag, but this really is just a summary of our argument for why it's worth looking into electrification. 2 takeaways. Again, you'll see a link to Rewiring America, which is really a sort of a really key source. Rewiring America has a calculator. You can go there for that. And again, use NYSERDA. It's a really powerful source as well. And then one thing before we go to questions, is that as I think I told you, I've now met with 4 contractors, and 2 of the contractors said, well, it's not, fossil fuel prices will, if you're on natural gas, the prices really won't change in the next 10 years. And I just thought, what? Of course, fossil fuels are going to continue to increase in cost. So that's something to pay attention to when you meet with contractors too, that in any case there's, heating and cooling your home and heating your water and cooking your food is, it's an expense that with the right kind of planning, can be, you can end up, I'm sorry, I'm rambling now, but you can end up being, having a fully electrified house. And I'm just going to stop rambling right now and switch over to Mary Jane.
I think we've had a great deal of information. I don't know how many people raised their hand, they're overwhelmed. Wanted to let you know a couple of things. Their presentation will be on the All Saints website. So if you want to review that, certainly it's there. We're going to have a time period of questions, because if you're like me, I have 150, but we're going to try to get some. And then we'll also try, if there are people who are further along in the process here who might want to share their experiences with trying to go more electrical. Because we're live streamed, I'm going to come to you with the mic, and you need to speak closely to it so that they can hear, okay? So, who wants to ask the first question?
That's okay. Good. Thank you very much for bringing up useful life of existing equipment. We sort of missed out by building a brand new home a couple of decades ago, and it's still got a lot of useful life in it. Return on investment and prioritization of what you might do first. Probably a lot of individual issues, your situation. I've gone through a long career associated with heating and cooling and energy audits and all that, and there was always someone available, usually for hire, to do the energy audit. Is there going to be someone similar for this kind of planning? Because you really want to get the most bang for your buck. And if you expect everybody in this room to figure this all out on their own, I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's got to be, even if it's paid for advice, to guide people, because I agree with you, the contractor's not the way to go.
I think you've made a really good point there. One, and you're absolutely right, because I know I can't believe how much energy I've put into learning to understand how my own house works in the past 6 months. And it is a huge process. And I have found that some contractors are more helpful than others. There is also a link in our resources to NYCP, which is New Yorkers for Clean Power, and they have people who are willing to, who volunteer, who are very knowledgeable and very skilled, and they are energy navigators, and they will help you with some of this. They're not going to replace your tax accountant, but if you need someone to help walk you through what the best way for you to approach your particular housing situation, they can be a huge resource, and that link is in our materials as well.
And I just add that Cornell Cooperative Extension also has an Energy Navigator program with people who can help with this kind of situation, walking through this process.
Ooh, and one last thing.
So the question was, is there going to be anybody who's going to really help us through this process so that we're not doing it alone? Almost a mentor, right? Somebody who's going to help us through.
The other thing, too, that New York State is doing is each region, including yours, has a clean energy hub. And those people in each set of counties is their job is exactly this, to help you walk through this, to be a resource. I did go and look at the energy hub that is for Syracuse, and they are up and running. This is a new program. You can reach out, you'll see an email there, and they will continue to be a resource too. They're called the Clean Energy Hubs.
We've in Broome County, we've actually partnered with our Energy Hub to do some tabling. They are amazing. They know the New York State programs inside and out, and they're coming up to speed with the IRA programs just like everybody else. Yes, we'll figure out how to make the QR code available.
Yes, we actually have tons of extra copies of the card, and we would love it if you brought some home with you, some extras, and passed them around. I keep them in my phone case and buttonhole people with them because they're so handy.
Yeah, we could put that on the website.
And we
yeah.
could put that on the website. The QR code, if you're not comfortable with it, with QR codes, there's also a URL which is easy to remember, which is bit.ly, so bit.ly, / just plain better. That's also on the card as well.
I think there's people like me going, I don't know if I can remember that.
Oh, yeah.
It's easy. Just plain better, that's right.
I think you also brought some that we could put on our back table.
Yep.
Okay. Somebody else have a question?
How do you get the snow off your solar panels on your roof?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
How do you get the snow? How do you get the snow off your solar panels?
Oh, that is a great question. And the people who installed my solar panels were at pains to say, now remember, don't climb up onto your roof and get the snow off your panels. It will all take care of itself. Please don't go up there. And then every time I saw the contractor, he was like, whatever you do, don't go up on the roof. And I was like, do I look like someone who's going to climb onto a roof with a shovel? The answer is no. So, yeah, you don't have to worry about that. I've had my panels on since I think it was January of 2017. I've never had a problem. Yeah, it just melts. Yeah, never had a problem.
Not really a question, but I have solar panels on my house. Never have a problem with the snow. Live out in Marcellus, big snow country. So it's not a problem. It just, just disappears. So that's not a concern. I also have an electric vehicle that I just bought a few months ago, and I love it. And I was able to get $2,000 off through NYSERDA. It didn't qualify for the federal stuff because it's a Hyundai, so it's not American, battery made, whatever. But NYSERDA you still got the credit through NYSERDA. But also, if you're going to put in panels on your house, a lot of property tax think that's an improvement to your house. But there is a law, and I think it's still in effect. We've had our panels on for quite some time now, where they cannot increase your property tax because of addition of solar panels. And so they can't increase your taxes for something like, I think it was 15 years. I think we've had ours on for almost 8 or 9 now. So that's something good to keep in mind, because the people that install your panels have to give you some kind of statement so that you can take that to your tax people.
I would also throw in that if people have, if you have the energy to stay for a couple minutes after, I can show you the app on my phone that where I can check in on my own solar panels just through an app, make sure they're all up and running. It tells me how much energy I'm creating by the day, week, month, and year, and how many equivalent trees I've planted, which is unbelievably satisfying.
Just for clarification, did I understand that if you've plugged into community solar, you wouldn't get the credits for individual solar? Is that right?
Yes.
Now that this would probably be a next week question, but that would be the same for non-for-profits. So like the church, I think we're into community solar, right? So it wouldn't make sense for us to get solar panels.
Well, no, it's the other way around.
You'd opt out of the community.
Right.
So that's something we need to study, yeah. Okay.
Yes, you can, if you've got community solar now and you wanted to add rooftop, then you would just switch to rooftop and cancel your community solar. And then the church, because it's a house of worship, would be eligible for, it wouldn't be a tax incentive, obviously, because the church doesn't pay taxes, but it's what's called a direct pay program, where you get, you get exactly the same incentive, except it's in the form of direct pay rather than a tax incentive.
So I've got kind of a solar panel nerdy question. We've had panels on our house since 2016, and I speak. How's this? Is this better? Okay. So we've had our solar panels on our house since 2016, and we've talked about purchasing batteries. But in New York State, like most states, you can add energy that you're not using, that you receive, that generate through the panels. It goes back into the grid, and that's good. But is there any advantage to not do that and store the electricity in our house through batteries? And I'm not only financially, but what's the effect on emissions? What's the most efficient way to reduce emissions? To purchase batteries or to just continue to feed the grid? This may be, you may not know the answer to this, but.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
I do know there is, and I know you didn't want to talk money, you wanted to talk emissions, et cetera, but there is a 30% uncapped incentive under the federal IRA program for battery storage. So you might want to work the numbers. A difference in emissions,
I would imagine that some of that would be related to how big your array is and how much you're generating from month to month. But I wouldn't have any idea how to answer that question, although it is an excellent
It's
one.
a great question. If you find out the answer, we'd like to know.
Yeah.
Someone wrote in, we have solar panels not on the roof, but rising from the ground, and we've had to scrape them clean to keep batteries charged.
We're part of an HOA, and our HOA doesn't permit solar panels because someone thinks they're unattractive. So I'm wondering if there's any chance there's legislation being talked about in the state of New York to put an end to that sort of restriction?
Again, that's a great question. That sounds like a good reason to get on your. Do HOAs work like community boards? You've got a community. Do you get elected to HOA boards? I don't know how they work.
Yeah.
But that stinks. I got to say that.
Yeah. Were you saying that you're aware of legislation that's going through or not? Yeah. If it is, it hasn't risen to our advocacy group yet, and our New York advocacy group would be all over that.
Yeah.
I think if it was going through. So
Yeah, that's something we'll definitely look into.
yeah, it's a great point.
I have just a comment. In January of this year, there was a horrendous automobile accident in northern New York in St. Lawrence County, and it involved migrant farm workers working in solar panel energy. And there's a business located, of all places, in the middle of nowhere in Cayuga County that's going great guns, doing all of these installations all over the United States. And it was horrendous to try to help the family of those people that got killed to even get information. And I'd like to just have a moment of silence for those people that have lost their lives, just so you and I can have some cheap energy. So for those 6 that lost their life in St. Lawrence in January, let us remember them and their loved ones who miss them. And I just ask that we pray that there be just actions taken utilizing foreign-born labor to do all of these different kind of jobs that in a lot of ways are very, very dangerous, only they're never explained to them how dangerous they are. That's the end of my comments. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So all of this is quite new. It's under an administration I think we're in favor of. What happens if they go out and the other side gets in? What's the possibility that these get pulled back partially or fully?
Well, I think we can imagine. I think one of the ways that you kill something like this is you defund it, right? We know that there's already been efforts to remove IRA money that funds elements of the Farm Bill, and I think we continue to push back on that. But yeah, I think one of the reasons we're out here trying to make sure people know about how good these bills are, these laws are, and how beneficial they are to us personally, to our communities, to our industries, to our children and grandchildren's futures. We want people to know that, and the more people who know it, the more we can push back with greater strength, with greater numbers, and ensure that these things stay in place.
100% agree with that. The other thing I'd say too is that it's already turning out that the Inflation Reduction Act has already sparked so much innovation, has already sparked people taking, doing installations, creating those jobs. It's been a whole lot more successful than I think even its strongest supporters thought it was going to be. So I think as time goes on, I think it's going to be harder and harder to defund. And I think the whole point of having a 10-year span is to give people a chance to plan, because you can't, a 2-year program is really, it's just not effective. Everybody needs a long-range plan. So I'm increasingly optimistic that even if we have a change of administrations, this will be a hard thing to kill. It's already too alive.
I just wanted to respond to the gentleman's comment with the final comment from the Sunday newspaper from, what day was this? September 3rd. I kept the comment, this article, and it concluded with the most important thing anybody can do with regard to with climate change was to vote for a climate-friendly government agenda. That's how they concluded this whole article on, because it's important we each take our own individual steps, but you have to vote for a climate-friendly government agenda.
Could not possibly agree more.
Yeah, here. Absolutely.
Questions or comments?
Just had one comment. This has been an excellent presentation. It's been very enlightening. It's been thought-provoking, and it's pushing each one of us to do something, not just to accumulate all this info. We need to get our rear ends in gear and do something. Thank you.
Tonight we're going to finish with a prayer from Jerry and a poem from Diane, and then they will be available. They've got some visuals here if you want to take a look. They'll be available for a bit after we wind up. Okay?
There's still some nice cookies and stuff. Those lie spring, you want to dry it down and
As we were preparing for this presentation, I happened to meet a number of people who were members of this church, and I don't know why it brought this poem back to me. I wrote it a long time ago and kind of finished it a couple years ago, but you all kind of made me think about this. So I long to be wondrously naive again, to view my world without negative spin, to mask events in a subtle glow, a sticky sweet substance of the color rose. I long to raucously run as a girl again, take a gravel hard fall and skin my shin, then be revived in pliant arms and seduced to laughter by maternal charms. I long for roller coaster days of joy and woe, where emotions peaked high and valleyed low. Uncurbed imagination served as guide on a seemingly unending magic ride. I long for the days when things weren't so focused, before the truth swarmed and gnawed like locusts, before spite infused every act and word, and the trust in our convictions became so sure. We must work for a future that binds us one to another, our loved ones, strangers, mothers, and brothers, moving forward astride, our eyes open wide, not demanding alignment, but staying allied. We must work for the what and who we can be instead, when the good of others fills our hearts and heads, where we speak, not shout, and listen with favor, and fulfill the promise to love our neighbor.
And in conclusion, during this time of great imbalance on planet Earth, we may feel ourselves torn between the priorities of healing ourselves, resolving our own inner spiritual or psychological problems, and attempting to cure the social and economic ills that beset our culture. While each of us undoubtedly has much inner work to do, this attitude misses the main point of prayer. It continues to view the individual as somehow separate from the rest of the world. But if we accept that we are totally part of this living earth, then we must recognize that isolated health is an illusion. Healing ourselves and working to resolve the contradictions in the human earth ecology is the same work. I have come to terms with the future. From this day onward, I will walk easy on the earth, plant trees, kill no living things, live in harmony with all creatures. I will restore the earth where I am, use no more of its resources than I need, and listen to what it is telling me. And that's by Mary Oliver. Thanks everyone for being here, and good night out there in TV land. Yes. Next Wednesday, on September 20th, here also, somehow, we're trying to figure out how, we're going to have Diane and Maura also talking about the parish buildings and how a parish can green itself as a whole by improving the infrastructure and the buildings that it resides in. So that's going to, again, be at 7 o'clock. It'll be live streamed, and we'll be working on how and there'll be a Zoom capability, so be there, or be square. Yes. Right. Father Fred would like people to show up. That's the gist of it. And we will. Thank you again. If anyone has a couple of dollars that they'd like to give to the task force, we'd be glad to accept it. There's a basket somewhere out in the back. You want me to